Okay. Mitzvah Kufayin Hey. HaMitzvah HaChomesh V'Shivim Umeya Ki Shetzivo Lintois Achre Rab. Kshetipo Machlekes Ben HaChachomim explain. So Lintois, it's not a din of Achre Rab Lahatos. That's why Machriya, but it's a tzivui and a mitzvah in Minyan HaMitzvos. And when is the mitzvah applicable? Kshetipo Machlekes Ben HaChachomim B'din Midinei HaTorah Kula. So it means that we'll talk about mitzvah soon more. It means it's talking about biru dinei HaTorah. V'chein nimshach v'noto, or nenaheg, the way Kapov translates both words. V'chein nenate b'din, v'chein nenaheg b'din proti. Not only in a kvias dinim for Klal Yisrael, what the din is in general, but even in a peculiar, an individual din Torah, gam kein b'din shebein Ruven v'Shimon derech Moshe k'shetipo machlekes bein dainei irom, is machlekes in dainei irom. Okay, we didn't say what the first case is. Okay, im Shimon hu achayiv, explain the second case. Shimon or Chayiv or Ruven, Nimshach or Nelech, the way Kappa translated, Acha Haroiv, Vu Amroi Yis'ale Achre Rabim Lahatos. See, here is a very interesting thing. Just before, and this I think you have in other cases, but let me just make the point here. The Rambam in Shiur Shmini, where he's very clear that mitzvah tzivui, kloima sha'ato tetzave es ha-mitzuva la'asa is dovo, misurim lo la'asa, is going to taveil le'echo, in the infinitive is you can tell him what to eat, tetzaveu le'achol v'toimer le'achol, or tetzaveu limona le'achol v'toimer lo al tochal. So it's not clear at all in Shiur Shmini that an infinitive could actually be a command, but he's taking it as a double portion that it is. I'll have to see what this is. Beya Amru, Ruba deraisa. And what? Since Ruba is deraisa, therefore it's a mitzvah minyan HaMitzvos. Kvayis baru mishpatei mitzvah zo. V'diktu keho b'mekoymois mei Sanhedrin. Now, so l'chira in the first case where he's talking, shetipo machlekes bein hachachomim b'din midinei HaTorah kula, l'chira we're talking about a Sanhedrin Hagadol, and the Dan in Ezed Din from Torah Kula, and they want to be Kaveh Alocha. So the Kvias is Al Pi Roiv, and it's a mitzvah to go after the Roiv. l'cheira, you get the impression like that in Minyan HaKotzer also, because in Minyan HaKotzer it says lintois achrei rabim im tiye machlokes bein hasanhedrin bedinin shenema achrei rabim lahatos. So l'cheira, if he's talking about Sanhedrin the Heyadiyah, he's referring to Sanhedrin Agodol. And he doesn't mention the second case of the din proti between Ruvain and Shimon. So I assume that the fact that he quoted Sanhedrin first, that's the Ika mitzvah. And he cans the Ika mitzvah in the Minyan HaKotzer that it's Hachroa Sanhedrin in Dina Apialoi. And l'cheira, it comes out that the Ika mitzvah of Leches Acharoiv is the kfiyas of Torah Shebal Peh or the kfiyas of Alocha of Bezin HaGodol. How they make a drosha. And maybe, if you're ready to accept this approach, so maybe that's why the Rambam quotes mitzvah kuf ayin hey right after mitzvah kuf ayin dalet. Kuf ayin dalet is the mitzvah of listening to Bezin HaGodol, because this will tell you how to listen to Bezin HaGodol, because Bezin HaGodol is nikva through the life. The Rambam in Mishnah Torah also quotes the din that Reiv is a machriya in Kviyas Halacha from Bezin HaGodol. And he says that by Bezin HaGodol, Hochen Acher Rubon Umotzin Adova Acher Harabim in Perek Aleph Milchus Mamim Halacha Gimel. Dvorim Shelamedim Min Adin Im Eskimu Aleihen Bezin HaGodol Kulon Harei Eskimu V'im Lechlech Rubohen Holchin Acher Haroiv Umotzin Hadin Acher Harabim. And he says it also applies to Takonos and Gzeres. Roy Ligzo, Lesakein, or Yanichu, or Meminig, Volo, Mixos, and Shein Roy Ligzo, Gzerezo, or Lesakein, Takonos, Ubalo Yanich, Haminig, Volanich, Haminig Zer, Noisin, Venoisin, Elu Kenege, Vahoch Acharuben, Motzin Adovo, Acharabim. However, the Rambam in Protei Mitzvos in Mishnah Torah quotes the mitzvah of Acher Rabim Lahates not in Hilchos Mamrim by Zochim Mamre, but in Hilchos Sanhedrin. The Rambam in the Protei Mitzvah Hilchos Sanhedrin lintos Achrei Rabim im nechleku hasheftim. So when you talk about sheftim, nechtu hasheftim, you're talking about judges when you have a court case. So this is the second case the Ram quotes over here. If there's a din bein shebein Ruvain v'Shimon, derech Moshe tipo machlekes bein deine irom im Shimon hu achayev Ruben. So that's the din neilech achalev, and that's the Ram is quoting in Mishnah Torah. The second case seems to be the mitzvah, and that also you'll see in Perek Ches of Hilchos Sanhedrin Aloch Aleph. Bezdin shenechelku miksosen oimim zakai, umiksosen oimim chayev, hochin acha horoiv, v'zo mitzvahs aseh shel Torah, shneim acharav lahatos. So it's interesting. The Rambam in Sefer Minyan HaMitzvos and in Minyan HaKotzer seems to say the Ikar mitzvah is by Sanhedrin HaGodol and Kfiyas Dinei HaTorah, and therefore he places the mitzvah over here right after the mitzvah Aseh of listening to Sanhedrin HaGodol, whereas in Mishnah Torah he seems to say that the Ikar mitzvah is listening. Even though he quotes, he refers to Acharav Lahatos, at least the Loshen, Holchen Acharubon in Mamrim, but the mitzvah say he quotes in Hilchos Sanhedrin, both in the Protei Mitzvahs and in Mishnah Torah. Next, we have to try to understand what the issue is over here. I could have imagined that since if you open up Chumash and Achrei Rav Lahatos is in Mishpatim, prior to a discussion, it's not in context of Sanhedrin HaGodol at all. So I could have assumed that in context of that, it's in a Din Torah, or in a when someone's Chayiv Malchus, or someone's not Chayiv Malchus, someone's Chayiv this, or Chayiv whatever Einish, but it's not necessarily in Sanhedrin HaGodol, therefore it's in Mishpatim. And that L'chera would support the Ram Mishnah Torah and in what their mitzvahs and in halachos. Achronim ask, why does the Rambam conclude that Achrei Rav Lahatos is a separate mitzvah? Why shouldn't it be part and parcel of the Protei Dinim in the din of the Dinei HaMishpat? So this question, l'chera, is not let's say is not valid, I would assume, according to the Ram Minyan HaMitzvos, because this is only if the mitzvah is limited to mishpatim. So you say that the protek dinim is lachas acharoi. But here in Sefer HaMitzvos and also in the Minyan HaKotzer, where the mitzvah is the kvias of loiv of dini HaTorah and Hedron HaGodol, l'chera, it's certainly not a prat in the dini HaMitzvah, but it's part of the mitzvah say al pi HaTorah she'yerucha. Maybe then you should look like this. So then you can flip it and say, Adrabah, it's not part of the Dini HaMishpat, but it's part of Al Pi HaTorah she'yerucha. And then, according to, just to understand the question, according to the Ram Mishnah Torah, you can ask the kasha, maybe it's from the Dini HaMishpat. And this kasha is not coming in a vacuum. I'll give you another example. For example, in Parshas Shoftim, it talks about when the Bir Adin of Zochei Mamre, it says V'kamto v'alisa, that you have to, the bezin of the ear doesn't know the din, lo shamanu, lo kibalnu. They go, the bezin itself or the shluchim go to Yerushalayim to mevar the din. And they have to be oile to Har HaBayis and to the bezin of Har HaBayis. And then, if the bezin of the Har HaBayis doesn't know, they go to the bezin of Pesach HaZorah. And this is a sifri in Piska Kufn and Beis. Bekamto miyad, that means when the bezin in the ear is unsure about what the din is, doesn't have a kabbalah. Bekamto bebezdin, mikan omru, shleisha bote dinim hoyushom. Echad al Pesach Har HaBayis, v'echad al Pesach HaZorah, v'echad b'lishna gozes. Boyin lezeh shashar HaBayis, shahar HaBayis, v'yoyim kach dorashti, v'kach dor shechaverai, kach limadati, v'kach limdu chaverai. Im shomu omuloi lohem, omulehem, v'im lav boyin lezeh shal Pesach HaZorah, v'yoyim kach dorashti, kach dor shechaverai, kach limadati, v'kach limdu chaverai, v'im shomu omuloi omulehem, v'im lav Eilu ve'eilu boin lebezin hagol shavi lishta gozes. Shemishom teitzek yoytze teil l'chol Yisrael shnema min hamokim hahu asher yivcha Hashem. So this Kamto Elisa, the Ram doesn't have, and then Kamto Elisa is you Kamto Elisa. There's the one in the beginning of Har HaBayis, the one in Azor, and then Lishta gozes. And there's no separate mitzvah minyan mitzvahs of a Kamto Elisa, but it's a prat in the dinim from Kachol Sherucha and the bureau from Dini HaTorah. So you could have imagined the same thing, that Achrei Rav Lahata is also a din in the bureau of Dini HaTorah. I'm wondering that the same way that the Ram says in Sherish Yud Beis that the mitzvah shchita, which is noyeg in all different types of kochim, of Ma'aseh Oila and Ma'aseh Chatos and Ma'aseh Osram and Ma'aseh Shlomim, is not, the mitzvah, we have to explain it, it's different, probably in different culture. But we should start, because the example the Ram gives is Malicha, Mechus Zman, Tomim, and Achilus Kochim. Those mitzvahs, which are noeg in all the kochim, we don't look as part of Ma'aseh Oila, Ma'aseh Chatos, but we look as a separate mitzvah. Here, especially if you accept the approach here in Minyan HaMitzvos that the mitzvah applies of Achram Lahates to Biur Dinim Sanhedrin, and also in a din Bain Ruvain L'Shimon. So it's not a peculiar din in Sanhedrin, and it's not a peculiar din in Biur Dinim Sanhedrin. It's not a peculiar din in Shoftim, in Mishpat Bain Ish L'Re'ehu, but it's a general mitzvah which applies in all cases. So then possibly, therefore, the Rambam might have gone out his way to say two cases to prove that the mitzvah is noeg beyond the purview of any singular mitzvah. So it's a separate mitzvah. Now, the Rambam is not an isolated phenomenon over here. Rav Sadigan also quotes a Minyan HaMitzvos in Perek Tezayin, Omud 137. V'sivo b'mikrim shenechlokim b'shnei klolim mishpotiyim yeduim v'nechlaku hadayonim bohem sho'emes eitzel holoi yehei minyonoi asher yehei ko'imroi achiram lahatos. He's learning in Din Torah, and the din of achiram lahatos. And to support that, Tez Zayin, just keep in mind, Perek Tez Zayin, it's a Perek Tez Zayin. Tez Zayin is the Perek, a Perek Ashisha also Shara Mishpot, Vushlosh Esrei Mitzvos. Horishon, Shebohen, Lirdof Achat Tzedek, Vayosh Leches Bikvoseim, Tzedek Tzedek Tildoy. We also Shadayin Yume Machmas Psika Ro. We also Shirachem. Aladal. This is all in Dinei Torah, Beirish L'Re'ehu. In the middle of this, he says, "V'tziva mokum shenechlu b'shnei klolim mishpiotim yeduim achrei lav lahates." So this is in a din Torah between two people, and that's upside the good. This is okay. Okay, say that's upside the good. Now let's get back to a more difficult issue. The Rambam has a very enigmatic quote here, and the question: what does he want to prove from it? Ubebeir Omru. Here, Kapach, Ubefeirish Omru. Okay, it is a Pirish, we'll see that. Perish Omru, Ruba de Reis. Okay. Now, L'chera, looking at this, it doesn't say much. The best that you can glean from this text is that the application of Reiv is not a drasha, but it's Gufei Torah. As the Ram clearly says in Shiur Sheni, that if the Matiki Ashmur use a lotion of Gufei Torah or Deraisa, we know. So maybe that means the Pirush Makubal. Okay, so it has a din of Torah Shabbat. But is that the issue over here? The Leilach HaCharoiv is a drasha, or that's Pshat and Posik, or that's a Pirush Makubal? Let me ask you the question a different way. This din, he's quoting a Gemara. The Gemara is about Bas Chof Gimel Beis. The Gemara is Ruba de Reis. So it means Roiv is a keveya from which city you bring the Egel Arufa, the majority of the population. The general populace is from city X, then you bring it from that city. The Rambam would say, Shmiras HaNefesh, Perek Tes, Halacha Vav and Zayin, Ein Ho'ir HaKroiva Mevir, El Vizman Sheminyan Ha'om Shebo, Kamo Minyan Ho'ir Ha'choika. Kov is only Keveya if the populace of the two cities are equal. Aval Im Hoyu Elu Shebo Ha'choika, Merubin, Al Anshe Ria Kroiva, Al Anshi Yaakov Mimeno Hochin Acharoiv VeHamerubim Mevin Ha'egla Af Al Pi Shehochin Acharoiv Min HaTorah VeHochin Acher HaKoroiv also Min HaTorah Horoiv Oidef. That's the Lashon of Rambam in Hilchos Loitzeach Shmiras HaNefesh. It's nice. But what's the raya? Because this Gemara Baba Basra says the following. Af al gaf, I'll read a quote, and I think the quote is self-explanatory. Af al gaf, the ruba de raisa, the kurva de oraisa. The kurva deraisa. So both are deraisa. And that's the Ram is reflecting in Mishnah Torah, really. Af hashehochin acharoiv min haTorah v'hochin acha hakoroiv, which is also min haTorah. Would someone say, or did the Rambam say, that the mitzvah deraisa leches achar kurva? So there are two ways that you can do this, okay? The simple way is that the Rambam has a clear assumption that Achrei Rabim Lahatos is a tzivur, which is a chiddush. If you remember, I pointed out in mitzvah hey, when we talk about infinitives there, the mitzvah tefillah, the Rambam only quotes ula avdai in context of other tzivuyim, but by itself, we don't find in minyan mitzvahs that there's a mitzvah which is an infinitive. So The question is, where you starting. So if you're ready to assume that it's a double portion, that there's a tzivui over here, the shaila is only if there's a drosh or not, then the Ram is very simple. That since it says Roiv deraisa, Ruba deraisa, so we know that it is a in Teresh B'Ksav, and from Shiur Sheni it could be a minyan HaMitzvos. So Mele, it's all set. Koloi, there's no tzivui, so Mele, there's no issue. Another way, which I want to think about more, is to say that Kolov also, Deraisa, is a mitzvah. But Kolov is only a prat in the mitzvah of Egel Arufa. Whereas Roiv is a din in Kol Torah Kula. Just for your edification, the Rambam does assume that Roiv is a tzivui. Because you look at Pirush Mishnayis, in the Rambam, in the Mishnah, first Mishnah in Hedron, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, the Rambam says like this: Umin haklolim b'teiraseinu shelo yehei mispa dayonim li'olam ela mispa nifrad. It should be an odd number. Kedei she'im tiyeh b'nei machlokes b'din min adinim yiyu al kolponim rubam maskiim l'dei achas. That assumes that everyone has a say. So if it's an odd number, you always have a majority on one side. Ba'mi'it b'hofchoi v'neilech acha das horoiv k'moi shechiva isonu. Okay. V'neilech acha das horoiv k'mo shechiva isonu teira b'kach shenema achre rabim lahatois. So the figure hey bezdim pochas mishloisha. So that is the Rambam's assuming, I'm just not sure where he gets it from, that the infinitive is actually a command here. And Memela, you can derive a mitzvah from the fact that it says deraisa. Deraisa doesn't tell you anything more that it's mufurish b'kor or it's a pirush makubal, but it doesn't tell you it's a tzivui. And that's where the Rambam cans it in Shiur Sheni. So just to say that since the deraisa is the mitzvah, it doesn't tell you anything. I would have said the question is it a tzivui or not? And I guess he assumes that it's a tzivui, but the question is it Shuka Shomik or Drasha? Where the Kolov is also a tzivui, just part, it's irrelevant for discussion over here. However, let's just now analyze this for a second. Isn't it a little different over here? When you talk about Achrei Rabim Lahatois in Dayonim or in Sanhedrin, you have a body, a defined entity, and they're voting, and you go after the Roiv. Whether it's about Dinei Torah, or it's about Zakai or Chayiv, or Reuven Shimon, but you have a defined entity, okay? In the case of the Gvova Basra, it's very different. because you have two cities. One, if the population is the same, you go after Korah. But if the population is greater, in one, you go after the Goyim. And that's Acher Rav Lahatos, which means what do? You extrapolate statistically from the fact that there are more people in city A than city B. Statistically, if a person was killed, it would be from city A, which is slightly different from that case. And maybe the Gemara takes a double poshut that you should equate Dayonim with what we call Rubadisa Kamon, with Tesha Chanuyos, and with Tesha Kosher, and one is treif, and a piece of meat fell out from one, and we assume it came out from the roiv. So you can use Rubadisa Kamon to set up a statistical roiv and say that it came from this city or this store. In fact, when the Gemara Chulin and Daf Yud Aleph and Aleph quotes the case, Menoho Milsa, the Omer Rabban and Zil Bosaruba, Minolon, Tichsiv Achrei Rav Lahatos. Ruba, the Isa Kamon, could go in Tesha Chanuyos V'Sanhedrin. And it even quotes Tesha Chanuyos first. So then, comes out very interesting then, that there's a mitzvah. In Minyan HaMitzvos, there's a piece of nevela found, or a piece of meat found, and there are 10 stores, 9 are kosher, and 1 is treif. To paskin that the meat is kosher is a mitzvah deraisa from Acher Rav Lahatos, which is an amazing, amazing thing. There's a mitzvah deraisa. But that's what the Chayil Ram is quoting. The Ram says, Ruba deraisa, that's an expression of the mitzvah. So the paskin, based on the Reiv, is a mitzvah say of Ruba deraisa. Now, whatever you're going to say, it's clear over here that the question Achronim asked is really not fair, because the din of Acher, the mitzvah of Acher Rav Lahatos, goes beyond the Kfiyas Dinim in Sanhedrin and goes beyond the Kfiyas Din in a judicial case when Reuven Chayev or Shimon Chayev, but it also goes to the case of what the Gemara calls Neilech HaChaloim, Rubadisa Kamon, and Tesha Chanuyos, Aseh Chanuyos. So this is a din which is not limited to any particular area, and certainly would fulfill the parameters of Shorish Yud Beis, which is a broad din, a broad mitzvah, which doesn't fall specifically under one particular category, is a separate mitzvah, Minyan HaMitzvos. Just an aside, which is really out of the purview of this, but just an interesting observation. The din roiv in Kfiyas Dinei HaTorah if you look at the Rambam and you look at the Gemara, it was only formulated in Sanhedrin HaGodol. It wasn't formulated in the Bezdin of Eir, and it wasn't formulated in the Bezdin, the Sanhedrin in Pesach Harabayis, nor was it formulated in the one al Pesach HaSanhedrin, Pesach HaZorah. Because if you look, the Rambam cans this in Perek Aleph of Hilchos Mamrim, Halacha Gimel. I think it's there, or maybe it's Perek Gimel. Just 1 second. Not mistakenly, the Rav pointed out this hour we're learning Nechnokim. I'm not sure, I don't remember. But whatever it is, I think it's true. The Ram goes like this. Perek Aleph Hilchos Mamrim Halacha Daled. Kishehoye Bezdin Hagodol Kayim Lo Hoye Seshom Machlekes BiYisrael El Kol Din Shenoilad By Sofek Li Echod MiYisrael Shoyer LeBezdin Shevi'iroi. Which is an amazing thing. The Bezdin Shevi'iroi is not only Chal Hashem in Mishpot Bein Ish LeChaveiroi, but it's a Chal Hashem in Biur Dinei Ater. Im Yodu Omuloi. They have Yediyah about this. But if they all knew, V'im Lav, Hari Hashoyel, Im Oisei Bezdin, Oi Im Shluchoi, Oi L'Yushalayim. It's a new thing if there's a suffix and there's a Shaila, and you ask the Bezdin Shebi'iroi, you should have a Yediyah in Teresh B'al Peh, and how to Darshan, whatever, and they don't know, they become obligated also to go to the Bezdin Shebahar Habayis, or to send a Shlucho. Im Shluchoi, Oilin, Yerushalayim v'shoyim lebezdin shebahar habayis. Im yodu omu lehem v'im lav hakol boyin lebezdin she'al Pesach HaZorah. Im yodu omu lehem v'im lav hakol boyin lelishkes hagozes. All three batei dinim. Lishkes hagozes lebezdin hagozes sheb'Yerushalayim v'shoyim. Im hoya dova denole b'isafik lakol yadua. If everyone knows him, lakol. Eitzel Bezdin Hagodol, Bein Mipia Kabbalah, Bein B'mida Shedonu Bo, Oyimim Lehem Miyad. V'im lo, Hoyadova Boro Eitzel Bezdin Hagodol, Donim Bo B'shaiten, V'noisin, V'dova Ache Eskimu Kula. Until there's unanimous opinion, and then he says, oh, if they can't reach unanimous opinion, oh, Yamdu Leminyan. So it's an amazing thing. The Rambam only quotes the Din Roiv when it comes to Sanhedrin, even though there is efficacy in the Bezdin Shebi'iroi, in the Bezdin Shel Harabayis, in the Bezdin of Azorah, in the Biro. But the whole efficacy is only if they know, because if one of them says we know, the discussion stops. We don't go anyplace else. But if they don't know, there's no Amid al-Roiv. You go to Bezdin Hagodol Sheb'Yerushalayim. Rov was formulated, that's what Ram says in the Minyan HaKotzer, that the Roiv is Has-Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin Hagodol. Roiv was not formulated in Biur Dinei Atera, anything less than Sanhedrin Hagodol. The only way that the Bezdin has efficacy is only if it's unanimous. Next. Now, I just want to show you. So, this Ad Kan Rambam, but I want to show you, I found two very interesting cases in Rishonim that they apply Roiv beyond the scope of anything that I knew about. Okay. The first is a Rashba. Truth is, it's based on a Sifri, but the Rashba goes beyond in his application beyond the Sifri. The Sifri is also a new application. He goes like this. It's a Chuvas Rashba in Hachadoshos Miksav Yad Siman Kuf Mem Dalet. This tshuva is also quoted in the name of the Rashba in the Chedushim HaMiyuchosim LeHaran in Sanhedrin Rav Dalet. I say Miyuchosim LeHaran because if you look at the Chedushim, it quotes the Ran once or twice, if I'm not mistaken, at least once, maybe twice. Okay, so it's Miyuchosim LeHaran, and he says like this: Odo Malta Shenims L'Svorim the Kleis Moish Sholem V'Abuseinu Omru the Klois is the question, is it spelled Klois? Is it with a vav or without a vav? Okay. Kachalois Moshe. Okay, Kachalois Moshe. Kachalois Moshe. V'abuseinu omu kachalas ksiv. Im hasvorim shenimsa behem the Chalois Moshe sholem hu to'os. That's the ask. Tshuva, da, ki kamo shenechelku, ben Osher ben Naftali, become Mekoimus. Ben Osher was the Kabbalah in Tveria, and Ben Naftali was the Kabbalah in Bovel. There were two separate Messiahs in Tersha B'Ksav. Motzosi shenechelku, b'milois chalukois marovi madinchoi, shkenom megmol b'nei hapilakshim, Pilakshim without a yud, ksiv, it's choser. Ubisforenu, ksiv mole. It's an amazing issue. I'll just ask you this question, even just before anything. We know, and that the Ram says in Akdoma to Mishnah Torah, the Ram says that Ravina and Ravashi basically reflect Talmud Bavli, reflect the Messiah of Torah Shabbat. And this not to act like Talmud Bavli. That's clear in Agdom. Okay. So we know, for example, in Sanhedrin, I remember from Gershon talking about Sanhedrin Agodol is the Bailim, not only in Torah Shebiksav, but they're Bailim not only Torah Shebal Peh, but also Torah Shebiksav. Because in the Sefer Torah Shemelech is the Sanhedrin came, it was a Magia from Torah Shebazor. It's not a you wrote thing. You need the Sanhedrin to machriya and to make sure that it's exact. So they're the Bailim Torah Shebiksav. In Talmud Bavli, we know that the Messiah Torah Shebal Peh is Talmud Bavli. Ish mipish, mipi Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mem Zugos. But what about the Messiah Torah Shebiksav? Is Talmud Bavli the Machriya? So what the Rashba basically says over here, he says, the Talmud Bavli says one thing, and we, for example, the Talmud Bavli says, Kidor lo'omer. It's two words, Ashitachas. Find me a Sefer Torah that's written, Kidor lo'omer, as something different than one word. So comes the Rashba, who says, "V'seforenu kosuv mole, v'chein b'hav makoymis ri tele shebachol mokim shono moitzim machlekes b'sforim." Omu v'meseches Seferim, which is a Yushalmi source, the time of the Goyim, shehochen acharoiv. Okay, it's a Sifri in Sforim Zazuta, it's three makoymis. So acharoiv is an amazing thing in the. It's Reiv Sforim Shema'olam. And the way the Ran quotes Kosma Rashba, the Hohavi Plukte, Dinchoi, Maroi, Plukte, Ben Osher, Ben Aftoli, B'chol Mokon, Shon Moitze Machlekes, B'sforim, Mesech Seifim, Ochel Achareiv. So what comes out is that Talmud Bavli is not the Bailim on the Messiah of Torah Shebiksav. And I would assume that in the Rambam also, because the Rambam, when he is interested in the Kfiyas of Parshas, he copied his Sefer Torah not from none less than the Sefer Torah Ben Aseh and the Sefer Torah Matzasi B'Yerushalayim for Chamish B'Shana. This is the Sefer Torah they used to copy. And the kfiyas of our parshas is based on the Rambam. It says the machlokes between the Teimonim and us about one case where the parsha is, because it could interpret it either way. The Rambam based on that. And interesting, just to give you another case, Rab Shapsi Sefer says that the Halaluka is without a mapik hay, because the machlokes in the Gemara in Abi Pesachim, and we see machriya like Rabbi Yechanan. And all because of that, he's machriya that Halaluka writes without a mapik hay. But if you look in the Rambam, in the Seidat Tefillah, where he quotes the Seidat Tefillah Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, he says, Hallelujah, in 2 words. So the ka is with a mapik hay. And he's working like Ben Asher. So first of all, the Talmud Bavli is all bias, is only in Torah Shabbat Peh. But then there's a new thing. They go after Reiv. You can have one sefer, the 100 Svarim. I don't know exactly how you can say Holchanach Reiv, but that is conveying the Meseris. I think the Rambam held that the Meseris is by the Sefer Chimadukdok, and that's why he was so excited about going after Ben Asher and had the Sefer of Ben Asher. And that Sefer is Machriya B'chol Mokum. There's another case. Okay, so even though I'll tell you, you look in the Sifri, Sefer Zatute, they have 3 machlokes they found, okay? So I would tell you, because the Sifri is talking about Sefer Torah Shabazorah, and there's a halacha that Sefer Torah Shabazorah is Kevei the Meseris. So if you found 3 Svarim in the Sefer, in the Azorah, so then there's an issue you can go after Reiv. But Reiv Svarim Shma'ilam, and that's the way the Rashba is learning in the Masechah Seferim. That's Kuli Pella. That's a Chidush Nifla. That should be Keveya. Okay? Another case, which I found, which is absolutely amazed by, there's a Ravid in the Teres Kohanim, applies the Dina of Hochin Achareiv to Droshes HaTeirah. For example, if it's Kosul in Reiv Svorim, Teirah b'nei Yoina, b'reiv ha'parsha shneim bo'ehen le'inyan oifos, Teirah u'b'nei Yoina, and in other parshas, it was b'nei Teirah v'yoinim. He says, l'chatchila, you require Teirim u'b'nei Yoina b'chol ha'parshas shenemru le'inyan oifos. The Ravid Teres Kohanim, look at it, I don't know. I'm not sure. Then when I was working on the Ravid, it was very meshubash in the Teres Kohanim that we have, and I had in my possession at Silum of Tfus Rishon, and he says like this: Maseches Chulin Perek Rishon, Poch Mai Talmud Kloim Menola Nikuva, Omar Rova Lo Lishtamei Kro V'Lichter B'Chad Duchte Min Bnei HaTeirim O Min Hayonim Pirush Di'i Kosav Hochi Hava Min LeMitzvah Vadai Bin in Teirim Gedolim, that the Reiv would be Kevei in the mitzvah. Ubnei Yoina Ktanim, Hol Bereiv Makaimis, and Yoya Teirim Bnei Yoina, Avol Ikuva Leka, Afila Bachad, Minayu, Midichsi Bachad Duchte Bnei Teirim, Vyoinim, Fahash the cost of a cool Teirim Bnei Yoina, Shmamin Ikuva. But there would have been a din of Hochin Achareiv. It's an amazing thing. Something like the Rash was a little different. This is, and if you want to look at this you find the Ravid in Teres Kohanim, in Vayikra, Perches, Halacha Daled. Now, next mitzvah, we'll pick up next week. It will not be possible to say the Shiur next Monday. We'll say mitzvah Thursday at this time. A mitzvah kuf ayin vov. Va mitzvah sheish v'shim u'meya hi shetzivonu. Now in Ibn Tibin, it says shoftim v'shoitrim sheyachrichu la'aseis mitzvah Torah. So shoftim v'shoitrim is Ibn Tibin. However, if you look at the Arabic in the Makor, it only says haham, which is the both. These are in all the kisviyad that are at least in my possession. The Ksav Yad Oxford, which is put out by Bloch, and Ksav Yad Kapach. It's the same word, and the literal translation should be dayonim. There's no shoitim over here. And however, comes Ibn Tibin and he says shoitim v'shoitrim. And this I want to point out. This is Ibn Tibin. I'm not sure. I just want to tell you what he does as a translator. Whenever it's not 100% clear how to translate things, and the Rambam has a translation, or the Rambam has the way he cans it himself in Minyan HaKotzer, Ibn Tibin will take the translation, the Rambam, what he wrote in Minyan HaKotzer, and put it as a text of the translation of Sefer HaMitzvos. So here in Minyan HaKotzer, you'll find it, and it says in Kuf Ayin Vov, Limnois Shoftim V'Shoitrim. And the context of that comes in Tibin and says, oh, he should see Vono, Limnois Shoftim V'Shoitrim. Okay. Now, the question you ask yourself is really Shoftim V'Shoitrim really two separate things? Or one thing? Or one general thing? In other words, there's a word that you could imagine that could, a generic word that could be applicable to both. I want to read to you this nice diuk in the Ramban Shorish Test. Just an interesting phrase. He says like this: "V'chein hakavona achasi lesolo kol hayotze min hagefen." It says chatzon v'azag. It means all. It's the context means a generic term for anything which comes. V'chein b'mitzvos Aseh. In mitzvos Aseh in general, ein haniflotim b'shem echod nimnen shtayim. If you have a mitzvah Aseh which has two subjects, you don't count it as two mitzvahs, you count it as one. Tichsiv kol b'chor asher yivoled b'b'chorcho b'tzoncho. You don't count b'chorcho as one mitzvah and tzoncho kol b'chor asher yivoled b'b'chorcho and kol b'chor asher yivoled b'tzoncho is two, but it's one. Uksiv b'chol ma'aser b'chor v'tzon is one. V'chein shoftim v'shoitim titin l'chol b'chol shalecha. So we look at it as not. He could have imagined, interesting, he could have imagined, if you'd read it, shoftim v'shoitrim, shoftim titin l'chol and shoitim titin l'chol. So the question is, what exactly is coming here? Is he ready to say that shoftim and shoitrim could be two in yonim, but since it's formulated in one pasuk, therefore it's one mitzvah? But I don't know if I would have said that by Boker and Tzayin. See, you have to ask him what the Ramban wants with this mashal. Mitzvah Shem, we'll discuss it a little bit more next week. But I just want to tell you that the Ram says in Mishnah Torah, shoftim are people, are dayanim who are stationary. The shoitrim are moving around. There are two different types. The shoitrim are moving around. There's the people that hit together with the judge. You don't allow policemen in Judaism, in its makor, to run around loose. There has to be the judge stands together with the policeman, and he should only act on the basis of this person who is Mamula Kolato Kula, is Roy Lahorus according to what he says, and not the policeman. And that's the Shoitrim together with the Mistoy. We look at the Ram Perik Aleph, the Hedron Allah Aleph. Mitzvah will pick up this more next week.